and then we'll move forward. Lord, we give you praise. We thank you for our time here together. May you be honored and glorified by our thoughts, our words, our actions. Lord, draw us nearer to you through this time as we explore just the different generations. And our heart's desire, Lord, is that all would know you. And so, Lord, help us to use these tools as we convey your truth, your message. And so, Lord, thank you so much. Thank you, and I just ask for your blessing upon each person with us now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so as we get started here, Kyle's going to jump right in here in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat to, if you weren't with us last time, that way you'll be able to grab part 1 of this series, as this is part 2. So I'll throw that in there, and then I'll be monitoring the chat as for any questions and things like that, and I can jump in and interrupt you, Kyle, as you go with that. Otherwise, Kyle, here you go.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of share my screen with you. I'll have, like Russ said, we'll have both recordings and both PowerPoints available as a download for free on our usmbyouth.com website after today. So I'm going to give basically like a fire hose worth of information. So if it just kind of gloss over and it's too much, we'll have that so you can look back on that, and I'll be able to answer any questions in the chat. So let's go ahead and share the screen. Okay. All right. Does everyone see the screen? It works? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is part 2 of this. I'm not going to give a long recap of what happened last week, but basically my quick story is I'm the student ministry pastor at Wichita, or First MB in Wichita. And about 3 years ago, I discovered that a lot of my high school students was graduating into nothing, even though we had a college ministry. And by the time they get to their mid-20s, they just weren't involved in our church. And I thought, is that our church or others? So I looked around and I started reading as many books I can, websites, YouTube pages. And I was fascinated on how different Generation Z and millennials are. So if you want a quick recap of the different generations, right now we have basically 5 generations in our church. About 50%, 25 and 25, are millennials, Generation Y, and Generation Z, but it's going to be 100% of the future church. So that's kind of why I want to focus on that. If you lump the silent, the builders, the baby boomers, Gen X, even though they're a little different, they still are the same in how we did church for decades. But due to technology and the culture shift that's drastically happening in the United States, Gen Y and Gen Z, there's a much bigger gap between those generations and the last 2. And so the church, I've noticed, kind of needs to adjust some of their methods, not necessarily their message for this. There's good news and bad news. If we're kind of thinking negatively of the millennials because they get a bad rap a lot, and some of it they deserve it, lazy, entitled, all that. We only have baby boomers to blame, and if we don't like Gen Z, we only have Gen X to blame because they're the ones who raised this generation. So to be perfectly honest, I am a millennial, but I cannot even imagine how the millennials are going to raise their children. Generation Alpha is the next one. We start over in the alphabet. So I have no idea what millennials are going to raise. The oldest one is about 5 years old, so there's not a lot of data with that. So last week I talked a little bit about if this is a new harvest, if you will. The old generation was pretty much the same. You had different methods, but the same type of year: corn, soybeans, all for the most part. You harvest them and you grow them in a certain way. Grapes are now the new generation. It's way more relationship oriented. You have to choose a spot. You have to be way more picky. It is tough to harvest grapes compared to the old way. So new methods is needed because a completely different crop is needed. And then last week, I shared the 3 biggest things with these 2 generations is experience is trustworthy more than words. Motivated by relationships, not position. Networking is going to be a new key value for leadership. And then want to belong before they believe. So I'm not going to go into great detail with that because we'll unpack that more today. So today is more about going deeper. And we look at Gen Z and millennials. And the reason why sometimes we focus a little bit more on Gen Z is because this Gen Z, I do believe, is the culmination of what millennials would be if millennials had more time and more technology. So this is kind of all on the same railroad track, if you will, but it's just kind of further cars down the road. So we look at some negative stuff of Gen Z, as in they're living in a post-Christian world, believe truth is relative, but also there's positive. They're very entrepreneurial in spirit, super multitaskers. They're probably, if a Gen Z is watching this, they're listening to me, they're on their phone, and they're probably playing a game all at the same time. And so one thing that we need to realize is that our life stages have been redefined. In the 1900s and probably beyond, there's, for the most part, 3 life stages: childhood, teenagehood, and adulthood. In the 60s and 70s, psychology started kind of putting the word adolescence on it. And so now there's research coming out, there's actually 7 different life stages. So there's childhood, then there's tween, like preteens, then there's a teenager, then there's young adults, which is like mid-20s, early 20s. After your mid-20s, then you're considered an adult. Then you're a career changer when you're in your late 40s, early 50s, and when you retire, they now call it a down ager, which I like that, but I'm not in that age group, so I don't know if that's insulting or not, but that's the life stage term. There's a book called Marching Off the Map, and they kind of talked about this life stages kind of changing, and they use this phrase, the extinction of childlikeness, as in children are growing up faster and faster and faster, but at the same time there's an extension of childishness, as in we let them grow up to a certain point, but then we don't actually give them adult responsibilities. So they have adult privileges but not adult responsibilities, and that's why you can see not till their 30s do they even consider themselves adult. The lines between adolescent and adulthood is becoming blurred. Rites of passages, whether it's culturally, sometimes Native American cultures way back when would let them go, these young men would go on a hunt, and if they're successful, then they're considered an adult. We don't really have those rites of passages anymore. It used to be about 20 years ago, you get a driver's license, you're now considered more an adult, but more and more teenagers are not getting their license till they're 18, or they have to because they go off to college. So because education is going longer and people are more going into college, they're not considered an adult or going to the workforce till 22 versus age 18 before. So the good news is adult temptations are down. Across the board, pregnancy outside of marriage is down, drinking is down, drunk driving is down, drugs are down in the young adult stages, but at the same time, adult responsibilities are down. More people are living at home, more people are not following through with getting credit or buying a home or giving their own cars or even paying their own cell phone bills because parents are doing that for them. So I was having a hard time kind of grasping this new reality. And so this is my way of describing this new reality, okay? So it might not make sense to everyone, and you can put some questions in the comment box. But here's the kind of the new reality with these 2 new generations. The baseline that affects almost everything now is that truth is relative. As in, there's no such thing as absolute truth. Truth is determined by my own experience, and then my feelings, and if that doesn't work, then by society, whatever the majority tells me is true. So that's the baseline. If that's the baseline, it affects this. Experience is valued. So what I experience is what I want to value with people. What I experience is going to determine what is true, what is not true. That's going to affect my reality. Is if I can't experience it, I can't trust it. So verbiage and knowledge through argument and the old way of doing apologetics, where you kind of have a logical argument to proving that Christianity is true, that's not as highly valued as it once was. This leads to belonging. They can experience belonging. They can experience if they feel that this group can belong to them. So that's what they ultimately desire, because that's what they can experience and that's what they can say is true. I belong here, so I'm more willing to believe what they have to say. Even if it doesn't make sense at first, they accept me. So that's where we kind of gravitate when we see these two generations gravitate to as many groups as possible. And yet they don't really gravitate to any one of them because it's a paradox. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Because this leads to anxiety. They are full of anxiety. In fact, Gen Z is the most anxious generation because they don't know how to cope with negative things. They don't know how to cope with disappointment. They don't know how to cope with things not working out, because technology and their parents have allowed them to play in an area or grow up in an area where everything works out for them and they don't even know. There's news articles, and this is kind of extreme, where parents are literally coming in and asking, what can the parent do to change their child's grade in elementary school? As in, the parent writes an article or the parent cleans up a classroom. Teachers are experiencing that now because they don't want their children to be left behind and getting a bad grade or for whatever reason. So the last thing is identity crisis. So this is the result. So I do believe these two generations are having an identity crisis where they have no idea who they are, what's their purpose, and that's kind of what they kind of seek out. They use phrase. They don't say, I don't know who I am. They say things like, I'm looking for a purpose. I'm looking to make an impact. But really, they don't know who they are because they're so full of anxiety, because they just want to belong, but yet they don't really belong to anything. They only seek out experience, and so that really puts a lot of pressure on seeking, and everything needs to be felt through feelings, because nothing is solid, because truth is relative. Two big factors are on the outside kind of helping guide that. One is online accessibility without accountability. Parents, and I'm not trying to throw any parents under the bus, you might hear throughout today very negative about parents. I'm a parent myself. I'm just saying this is generally speaking, because when we talk about generations, we're generally speaking in generalities, if you will. But parents is a big factor of why these two generations are the way they are. So again, not singling anyone out and not trying to throw parents under the bus, but parents are so clueless on the digital social media aspect that they're either allowing or don't know that their children are involved in so many things online way younger than they should. And the children then don't develop skill sets or boundaries to say what's good, what's bad when it comes to online. And the other thing is knowledge without faith. Gen Z, 1 out of 2 will have a college degree or a trade school degree. So this will be the most educated generation we've ever seen. And millennials, 1 out of 3 was. So they're getting all this knowledge. They have access to knowledge on YouTube, on master classes online, on webinars and school and all that. And yet the church is way behind on educating this generation, as an influence of biblical knowledge is shrinking more and more and more, partly because they're just not even in church. So these two factors are affecting this identity crisis. So on a personal level, for if you're kind of a Gen Z, with this, in the truth is relative kind of level, they're focused on the journey. They don't want this, I need to be saved, so I get to a point that I'm saved. They want to know, okay, after I'm saved, now what? What am I supposed to do? I'm a Christian, now what? And the church just naturally in the past just says, okay, assimilate into this area. But now they're having questions. Before I get to that point where I am saved, I want to know what happens afterwards. When they're experienced, they're craving real world examples. When we talk about love, what does that look like in a community? What does that look like when conflict? What does that look like in a marriage? All those kind of aspects, they want that real world example. Then they're looking for acceptance. To belong is to be accepted. To accept is to belong. So if they're coming in and you have tattoos, or you're not married, or whatever extreme example that you can think of, if you come in and the church isn't accepting of them right away, and I'm not saying we accept sin, but we need to accept that person, and that's a very long discussion separate to this, they're not even going to give the church a chance. And if they're full of anxiety, they want to escape. They want to get to points and be part of a movement that the church can offer that no other organization in the world can offer, is an escape of peace peace that goes beyond understanding. But the problem is we don't really talk about that because we focus more on the do part rather than the be part of Christianity sometimes as churches. And the last thing is purpose. They want purpose because purpose gives them identity. So even though the Army and Navy and all that, their recruitment is actually up because younger people are looking for purpose, and they think, oh, the military will give me purpose. And there's nothing wrong with the military in itself, but they're seeking that out, and they're not looking to the church to give them that purpose. And that's a huge thing. So before we can kind of move on, we need to talk about a paradox. These two generations are literally have a paradox because they're independent in one area and yet they're very dependent on their parents. They're trendy in some areas, yet they're very traditional in their practices. They both are alone and yet never alone, especially digitally. So when I'm going to share some things, it might seem counter or contradictory to each other, and that's just because generations, there's a whole bunch of different stuff in each generation. And so I'm going to try to do my best to kind of break it down. So there's two books that I'm going to recommend. This is the first one. Even though you don't maybe work with teenagers all the way up to age 23 is Gen Z. So they're post-college now. And they might not be in your church now, or you might not be involved because you're not working with youth, which is totally fine now, but they will be 100% of your church in the future. And if you can understand or begin to understand them now, it's going to make a smoother ride as they transition into your church leadership. But this is one book I highly recommend. It's not a Christian perspective book. It's based on a lot of psychology and study, but it is one of the best books I've seen about any generation. And it says this: the truth is as cultures filled with new realities, including technology, innovation, and alternative lifestyles, it becomes difficult for adolescents to distinguish between what is current cultural reality and what is timeless. It has always been in style for young adults to be progressive, but today teens and 20-somethings are often unable to judge anything as absolutely right and wrong. And this is, I don't know if it's Christian faith or anything like that, but the book isn't from a Christian perspective, and even they say they don't know what's right and wrong absolutely. So here's what's affecting that. Maybe you've heard this phrase before, but we are living in the biggest communication shift in 500 years. What happened 500 years ago? And we don't have to answer that, but actually it's the printing press. So the Reformation happened, Martin Luther, all that. His work gets published and spread everywhere. Education on how to read explodes, all because the printing press made it easier to copy printed materials. So a huge communication shift expanded the whole world. And we're seeing another one now digitally. So in ancient times, there's a quick little side note. In ancient times, pictures represented words. So hieroglyphics and all that in Egypt. Now we've kind of come full circle. Pictures represent feelings. Modern communication, we now communicate through pictures rather than through words again. So we've kind of gone full circle, and that's because the digital technology has affected how we communicate immensely. And the church is kind of operating still as if it was the printing press, and words do matter. Words create worlds. I do believe that, but sometimes written words are not enough. Teenagers particularly are watching more videos than they are reading the written word. So that's going to affect how churches communicate. So, and we won't go into a lot of Gen Z here, but particularly they are screenagers. And we talked a little bit about this last week, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they're digital natives, as in they grew up with this. They're the first mobile first and completely immersed in digital technology generation before. Millennials are that way, but they learned that skill set. They didn't grow up in elementary world with as much technology as Gen Z has. So that's why they're communicating more with videos than they are with words. So just here's just a fun email. The difference between boomers sending out an email and then millennials, and Gen Z is even worse. That's too many emojis for millennials because there's not a picture behind it like Snapchat. So TTYL, I don't know what that means. Talk to you later. So we now are shortened a phrase that's pretty short in itself. So here's what's happening. Because they are screenagers, they're experiencing the world through the digital form before they experience it through the physical form. They are physically safer than any generation before, but they're psychologically more vulnerable. They don't know how to switch on and off. So having a church have the scroll that says, please turn off your cell phones or please silence your cell phones, that is so archaic to teenagers that, and they just almost laugh at that. Like there's no way I'm going to do that, because they don't know how to live life online and offline. It's all together. It's all online. That's cutting into their sleep patterns. They're getting less and less. They're getting less and less sleep. And this education, the United States education system, not to throw them under the bus, but they're not helping by making school earlier and earlier and earlier. But biologically, teenagers need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep, and no one ever gets that. So the school system is actually hurting that. But the good news is they're actually less likely to leave their homes, consume alcohol or drugs, get a driver's license, because they don't need it, because they can experience anything digitally. And the thing that they can't experience, their parents will drive them to. They're less likely to go out on dates, and less likely to get pregnant outside of marriage. So some of that's good, some of that's bad. That's just because they're experiencing the world digitally. The result is suicide and depression have skyrocketed, because digital communication and digital experiencing the world does not replace real world experience. And so there's a disconnect, and they don't know how to cope with all those things, especially if they're being bullied at school. 20 years ago, you would go home, you could have a break from your bully. They're not going to come around your house or like that. But now they're going to bully online. So there is no relief and there's no escape. So here's what I've seen. And again, not trying to pick on any one church, but I've seen this battle that the churches have, this discussion that it's digital world versus the real world. And we need to fight that. We need to combat that. And that the real world is where people can experience Jesus. And the digital world is just fake. It's too convenient. And so they're fighting these two worlds. I'm thinking the more we can get teenagers and the more we can get 20s and 30-year-olds, millennials, into the real world in our church, the better off they'll be. Unfortunately, that's kind of the wrong battle. One, the battle will already be lost if we think that all we have to do is convince them that the real world is better, because they don't know any better. They've never, especially teenagers, have never experienced the real world without a digital component. They haven't. Most churches use projectors or screens to put words on worship, or even scripture on that. So we use technology even in the real world. So there's this battle, this belief that if your church has an app, or if they stream online services, or if they go on YouTube or anything like that, then if they're going to watch the service online, that means they're less likely to attend in the real world. The reason it gives them excuse, yes, to watch online, where they say, oh, I'm not going to attend church because I'm going to watch it online. But reality is, if you make your church service or your organization or your business so dynamic and so experimental, they're going to go whether it's online or not. And online could just get more people seeing and experiencing your church that wouldn't normally experience because they're not there. But that's the problem, is we kind of have this wrong communication style. The goal should be, how can we combine these two worlds? How can we combine these two worlds versus separating them? I have been talking to several churches, and there's that internal battle of, should we have online giving? And that's not as heartfelt. And I actually had a member of a church, not the church I go to right now, just to clarify, actually say that the writing of a check is more heartfelt than clicking buttons to give online. And that kind of mindset is so foreign to these two generations. I'm not pushing online giving. I'm just saying this is the reality. So online, the digital part should be, how can we engage people with Jesus, with our church throughout the week? And we can't be everywhere all at once. So if we prioritize our worship experiences, our life groups, our kids ministry, whatever it is, on Sundays and during the week, we can also connect with them and grow spiritually digitally through that. How do we do that? So that's something I really don't have full answers on. The best example I've seen is, I don't know if you know Judah Smith. He's out at City Church in Washington, whether you like him or not. He is the typical millennial pastor: skinny jeans, thick, huge sunglasses. I mean, that's glasses, like glasses that look like they're from the 70s, but that's the trend now because everything rotates back. But they created a church home app that's spelled like that, church home. I don't really like the name, but that's what makes sense. If you have time, download that app and check it out. It is fascinating to watch because it has both digital stuff. They have tons of videos, messages, digital Bible studies right there. You can do a digital life group. And they also have 24/7 live people. You can chat 24/7 through the app with a real person digitally. So this is the best thing I've seen, where people are literally experiencing church digitally, but there's also a real world human component to that. Again, I'm not saying your church needs to create an app. That's one of the examples. Okay, let's move on. There's 9 challenges, and we're not going to go over all 9, but there's 9 challenges that comes from this book. I want to focus on 4 of them that specifically can work with the church. But again, I highly encourage you to grab that book. It's a very thick and exhausting read, but it's very good. So here's kind of what the book says, and then I'm going to give some of my research and experience through what's, I would say, tips for the church, if you will. So they deal with empowerment without wisdom. The teenagers and millennials, Gen Z millennials, they are empowered with resources, tech, but may lack the maturity to wisely use that power. So common sense is becoming uncommon to our smart world. I think that's a great phrase that they say in that. So here's some of the church responses I've seen where I personally tried to implement it, or I've seen other churches implement it that has so far worked. So we must nudge them to explore a world beyond screens and theories. Now, here's the thing. Not demand it, not provide only those options, but nudge them, encourage them, positively challenge them. And that's why mission trips are actually one of the best things that the church can provide, short-term mission trips, to provide for people to experience the gospel message in the real world. Also worship experiences. So there's several new church plants that I know that have built an art painting station in the back of their church. So when worship happens, people can come back, and while worship is happening, they're experiencing and painting art. And then they take those paintings, and a lot of people paint really well, and actually put them up, and they have a whole gallery of that art experience. That might seem too crazy for you. I'm just saying that's an idea. Create a culture of village to watch the kids. Again, this might get me in trouble, so I apologize up front, but about 15 years ago, there was this trend of saying family ministry, that all the responsibility falls on the family to raise up their children, their teenagers and all that. And that is true. However, more and more families are not living Christian lives. They're not involved in the church. So putting all the responsibility on people whose generation is getting more and more non-Christian doesn't really work, in my opinion. And so what the research shows, that the more the church can support and come alongside parents and realize that parent involvement with the kids ministry, rather than dropping their kids off, the parents drop their kids off for kids ministry, is a huge factor in that. So creating a culture where it's very inviting and actually encouraged for parents to stay, watch, join in the kids ministry is effective, versus putting all the responsibility on a parent. Teach them equations rather than rules. So this is a new teaching style. Both generations respond very well to if-then statements. If you do this, then this will happen, versus saying, don't do this because it's a sin. It might be a sin, but again, if they don't experience it, it's not going to work. So you give them options and treat every choice as they should feel like a trade-off. They're going to gravitate more towards that. And that might be so foreign to you, because it's kind of foreign to me, but that's kind of what happens. So discipleship has become more than we need to walk every stage of life with them, and that you are with that person and discipling them for years to come. It needs to change a little bit more towards you're a micromanager at the beginning. You do everything for them. Then you're a manager. You give them tasks and how to do it. Then you're a supervisor. You give them tasks, but don't share them how to do it. Let them kind of wrestle with it. Finally, your consultant, you do nothing for them. You don't even give them the task. You just wait and they ask questions, and then you consult with them. We don't have time to get into that, but I thought that was pretty fascinating. The illustration is kind of discipleship, and the church should be more like a river than a lake. A lake it pools up. Rivers pull into lakes, but it stops. The movement, the discipleship, the spiritual growth stops because you're in a life group. That's the end. You're attending worship service. That's the end. But churches should gravitate and treat it more like rivers, as in there is something always the next step. Here's something we always want to challenge you with. Here's an experience we want you to have that you maybe didn't have before. Yes, you're in a life group. You can stay in that life group, but now we want that life group to do this, and you keep moving. We don't have time to get into that, but I just saw it with that challenge. It's some good points that I discovered. Adults, simulation without ownership. Adults have a over-prescribed students' activities, but neglected to allow for ownership and self-direction. So students and kids are allowed to be kids and students a little bit longer in their privileges, but not in their responsibilities, because the adults have scheduled them. Students, teenagers don't control their own schedule now. The parents do, and they're not taught the skill set to own their own schedule in college, and even then that might not happen. So we need to allow opportunities for them to start owning their spiritual growth. So Growing Young is another book I recommend. It's not the second book I want to talk about today, but Growing Young, I think it's based out of Life Church. They did this study as what are the factors that keep high school students in the faith outside of college. Once they graduate high school, what them keep going in the church. The biggest factor, there's two of them. The biggest factor was called Keys to the Kingdom, as in they literally give the ownership and provide ownership for students to serve and be in leadership roles within the church. They're treated like owners rather than like, okay, you're the assistant manager, or you're a customer, and you're not really part of the church until you're 18. They see that a student who serves in the church stays in the church. And so what they're noticing is becoming more of a free range leader by increasing their empowerment as they mature. So the more volunteers and the more challenges you give them, the more they're likely to say, oh, I want this church to succeed because I'm part owner of it, versus I'm waiting till I get a certain age and then I'm going to become part of the church. That's not working anymore. Faith for Exiles is the second book that we'll share about, but David says this: millennials and Gen Z are often more willing to be challenged than we are willing to challenge them. And I'm seeing that's a trend more and more for myself, for parents, and for churches. So if you're going to empower, and I like how they describe this in Gen Z, if you're going to empower someone, there needs to be somewhat of a risk. You cannot empower someone if you don't risk that it might not work. Then that means you're just doing it for them. So empower means you risk them a challenge, doing them something. You give them responsibility that requires them to think about, not a to-do list, responsibility to solve that problem. And then you reward them after one achieves. And we sometimes don't reward our volunteers or workers other than we have them stand up on a Sunday morning and we clap. Rewarding and that satisfaction is going to solidify, I want to keep doing this. I want to have even more responsibility. Okay. We need to move on because time is short. Individualism without perspective. They often react to the shifting world around them without a clear vision for where they belong. So they're more reactive than proactive in their reaction to things. Okay. So here's what I've noticed. We need to avoid, especially for millennials. Gen Z is a little bit better. They've kind of worked with and been so overloaded for their whole lives. They're a little bit better to this. But millennials are learning this skill set, and it's their biggest stress is choice overload, especially in the church. And especially with new believers. So we have a young family coming, they're joining the church, and they hear about, you should join a small group, you should attend a worship service. We got men's ministry, we got women's ministry, we got serving, we got all these things. We got 5 different things that you can do right away now. Go. Which one you want to do? that is so choice overload for them. They do not respond well. They don't want to make the wrong decision, so they make no decision. If your bulletin is full of opportunities for people to do something, that works great in the old days. That works great with previous generations, because then they have developed the skill set to choose and prioritize their time. Millennials are terrible at prioritizing their time. I've talked to a millennial, and this is a real statement. I said, hey, are you coming to our kind of millennial Bible study on a Sunday night? This is a year ago. And he says, oh, I got to mow my lawn. I don't know if I can. I mean, mowing lawns maybe an hour, but it was so emotionally draining for him to mow lawn. He couldn't show up to a Bible study. So focus more on the next step you want them to be. And there might be many steps, but focus and promote the next step rather than all the steps. Guide them to find their place in your church's larger story. See how they can communicate and find where they are, and that could be anything. Every church is different. Every culture is different. Size of churches, rural, urban, all that. So you know your church better than I ever could. But what is your church's larger story? And are you creating space for new people to join in very early on, or are they part of the story only after they become a member? That's something you need to think about. And then they lack resilience. They lack grit. So they hop from one opportunity to the next. With the current one becomes more difficult. Oh man, difficult is serving. Every week I got to serve in kids ministry. Oh, this is exhausting. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to quit. I'm going to do something else. Again, this is a paradox, because they want to be challenged more than we are challenging them, but at the same time, they don't have resilience. And so that's where it gets really hard, is if they sign up for something and sign up for serving, we still need to walk alongside of them in that, and not just expect that's the end. They're serving. That's all we need. They don't need anything else. I could go on and on about that aspect. Moving on. Consumption without reflection. So they are consumers without the ability to think critically or reflect on what they consume. This doesn't mean just digital media. This is why fake news is so popular, especially on social media. It's because we have to have Facebook and news agencies to explain what is fake news, because for some reason we don't have the natural ability to understand this doesn't make sense. This is probably not real. They don't have that ability. They were never taught that ability. And I'm not trying to belittle them, but that's reality. So the church's response is we need to teach them to process, to bounce back after hardship. We need to be open to maybe some of the things that maybe a panic attack, or we struggle with stress, or maybe a failed ministry job and all that. And how did we bounce back to that and look to God in that? That's something the church can offer that other organizations can't. Enable them to digest what they consume and process what they absorb. So train them to say, okay, here's what the Bible says. Why is the Bible true? Why does this make sense in the Bible? Why does this make sense compared to other things in the world? And see how the Bible can help be that filter, versus the Bible is true. You just need to believe it and not question it. Develop ministry, reflect, response time, whatever you call it. Some churches call it differently. So this is a new trend that I think is very easy, but it requires a lot of programming and creativity every single week. So we've developed this in our student ministry, and it was not good the first year we did it, but every year we've done it about 3 years. Every year we've done this, it's better and better participation and deepness. So basically what this means is, after the sermon, before we dismiss them, we give 10 minutes for them to reflect, 10 minutes for them to do something on what we just taught. So like right now, we're doing a 21-day series on prayer and writing out your prayers every day. So at the end, they're giving little cards, and they're supposed to write out their prayer for what we just talked about. We've had times where they're supposed to maybe just pray and be alone. They have times where they need to go talk to someone for a challenge, or write something out, or do something that reflects how they can, again, experience, that's the key word, what we just taught them. And sometimes it's just simply, okay, we're going to play a song. I want you to reflect on these words. And whenever you're ready, I want you to come up and just pray and kneel down and pray with someone. So that's pretty good idea that has worked for us. Give experimental homework. Like I said, prayer journals, We have them, remind them on social media, 21 straight days of not just praying, but actually writing out their prayers, because that's more experimental than simply just thinking and praying. So we literally print prayer journals, and everyone gets a prayer journal, and they have to write them out. That's something that we have tried. That's kind of worked the best so far, but there's a wide variety of stuff. Like I said, some people have had this huge board, and they're supposed to write their a name of who they're going to say, or who they're going to present the gospel to this year in 2020. I've seen a group do that. And then connect with them throughout the week. Social media videos should be a tool to connect with them throughout the week versus just a promotion of your next event. If you're using social media just to promote your next event, or that, hey, we got youth group tonight, or hey, we got church this morning or tomorrow, then you're not utilizing social media as well as what they're gravitating for. Are you putting the 3 main points of your message on social media as a reminder every Wednesday you see it? Our church has started doing this past year, is every Thursday at noon for 30 minutes. We call it Rewind, Thursday Rewind. And we go back and talk about and answer any questions about what our message was last Thursday, every Thursday at noon on Facebook Live. So anyone could see it, but it's just our way of getting the message out throughout the week in that connection. So Louis Gigolo leads the Passion Conference. He basically started it. I think this year, over New Year's, I think it was over 2 or 3 days, there was 30,000 college students in 3 different locations worshiping God. And everyone's asking him, how does he do this? How does he do this? And I love a phrase that I just recently discovered, and it says, our purpose is simply to create moments and movements. And so teenagers and college students particularly are gravitating towards the Passion Conference. And I don't think the worship is 10 times better. I think it's really good worship than any that we can get in most of our churches. I think there's just something special there, and teenagers want to be part of movement. So when we communicate our announcements as a church, or we communicate what we are as a church, we need to communicate, again, river more than lake. We are part of this movement. Here's where we're going. We want you to we want you to join us. Okay, switching subjects here. The second book that I think is absolutely essential for millennials and Gen Z is Faith for Exiles. This is from David Kinningham. He's the director of Barna, so he does all the research. This is actually the 3rd book in a trilogy, but I think this gives the practical advice. The other 2 explains what's happening. You Lost Me explains why they're leaving the church. This says, okay, what are the factors, and they have 5 of them, and we're not going to go over all of them. What are the 5 factors that are keeping teenagers and millennials in the church? And they have go through these 5. So he describes it as a digital Babylon, which I think is pretty accurate for this world. And basically what that means is this world, this digital world that has affected our culture in so many different ways, is accelerated, is complex, it's phenomenal access, it's profound alienation. They're connected, but yet they're not connected. There's a crisis of authority. They don't know who has authority, because everyone is shouting at the top of their lungs that they're right. It's not a physical place, but a culture, and with access to anything, God tends to be left in the margins. God's voice, I don't think, has diminished in any way, but all the other voices in the world has risen to that level, and the church is still continuing the same way probably 30 years ago in explaining the authority of God. So he used this as a digital Babylon. I like what he says. He says, we have allowed our technology to outdistance our theology. And for this reason, we find ourselves caught up with many, many problems. And so people, whether you're in that age group or not, we're all living in a digital Babylon. And so he describes it as this, like ancient Jerusalem and ancient Babylon is like this. And so he says, okay, there's an Acts 2 mindset. This is when Peter is speaking before the God-fearing Jews. When he gave his message in Acts 2, there's an underlying like foundational knowledge of God. They knew who God is. They might not have a relationship with God, but they knew who God is. They might not know who Jesus was. So when he spoke, there was this automatic knowledge, like, you know who God is. I don't need to explain it. You go to Acts 17, Paul is actually talking to people who have no idea who God is, no idea who Jesus is, and a completely different context, and therefore he speaks in a completely different context to them. And that's what we need to move forward on. They don't know who God is, and so basic Christian stuff is no longer basic anymore. So Jerusalem is mono-religious versus pluralistic religious, many gods. Slower pace versus frantic. Central control versus open source. Idols are religious pride and false piety. That's what Jerusalem really kind of tackled. Babylon, not so much. It's actually fitting in and not missing out. That's an idol. That's what I seek, I drive for. So we're living in a digital Babylon. So here's what he says. Here's what we need to do living in a digital Babylon to develop resilient faith. So I'm just going to go over, I think, 2 or 3 of these. He has 5. They're all really good, but I just want to focus on a few of them. To form a resilient identity, experience intimacy with Jesus. So we need to, as a church or as an organization or as a missions field or as a college, whatever it is, we need to clear religious clutter for closeness and joy in Christ. Joy is a key word that I think the church can really gravitate towards. Is being in a relationship with Jesus should give you joy. It's not about ritual. It's not about a to-do list. There should be some excitement and passion to be in a relationship with Jesus rather than in following the rule. If you want to get a ticket to heaven, you need to be with Jesus, and we skip over that joy aspect. That's a crucial aspect that's kind of been lost. So he talks a little bit about new ways to evangelize, to serve in prayer, and I'm still trying to navigate all these different changes. So I'm going to share with you how I would explain it, but he probably did a much better job. So if you have any questions on that, I don't have necessarily all the answers, but here's how I would explain it in how they said the new way versus the old way. So when we evangelize in the current way, the old way, we need to treat it as following a band like Instagram. Sometimes churches have gotten to the point where we try to make it so simple and we try to make it so it's no big deal. Just accept Christ. You're a sinner. All you have to do is pray this prayer and then you're saved. And so it's coming across as all you have to do is follow us on Instagram. If you're a band, then go to our concerts / worship services and then just wear some swag. And that's it. You're in. Once you follow us, you're in. You don't necessarily need to do anything else with us following it. We just want you to follow that. The new way to evangelize, which is a little different, is tied closely to identity and purpose. Jesus didn't die just for you to be saved from your sins. He also died and lived in such a way where he gave us a purpose and a new identity. And what is that? That journey is just as important than just simply, hey, you're a sinner and need to be forgiven. Now remember, if there's truth is relative, telling someone they're a sinner, even if they are, and they don't experience that they're a sinner, they're not going to gravitate towards like, oh man, I need saved. And so how we evangelize has to change. How we serve. We want to make it as easy as possible then to serve. Hey, just serve. We need help. We're desperate. So when we promote, we need 3 people to volunteer here. Could you do this? Or we treat church membership as the only benefit of church membership is so you can serve or so you can be on a decision-making board. Well, forget it. Millennials and Gen Z, they're like, well, I don't need to do that. I'm okay. And that's why maybe church membership is hurting in several churches. Serving should be focused on the exact same serving opportunities. They do the exact same thing, but we need to constantly remind it on a weekly basis almost. Serving makes an eternal impact. You're serving in the nursery, you are making an eternal impact. And we need to remind them because sometimes, and anyone knows who serves in church, serving in the nursery, you really do make an eternal impact. You're a saint if you serve in the nursery. But sometimes you need to be reminded of that. And it's just a way of saying thank you. Prayer, it's ritual-based, habit-based. Pray before every meal. Say the same thing. Dear God, thank you for this meal. Amen. When we should be treating more prayer as the one thing they can experience that they can't do digitally really well, and they can't do it on their own very well as much as they could in a group, is if they have a vibrant, relevant, responsive prayer life. That if you can get them to get that part of their prayer life very experimental, man, their faith is going to grow. So evangelism moves from event-oriented, as in a single event, you come to Jesus by going up here and praying this prayer during this worship song, to a process and event-oriented. There's many events. There's a whole process. You're a Christian, but now what? Here's what we want you to do, and move for that in this process oriented. It's about the journey, not just you are saved, great, let's celebrate that, and then, oh, you're on your own, you're great, keep going. They don't know what to do after that. All right, next, intergenerational relationships, and this is the most interesting aspect of what they're seeing. Growing Young talked about something about this as well. This is two different books talk about this one aspect of what makes a resilient faith for people, millennials and Gen Z. So it says, have a strong relationships with other adults 1 or 2 generations ahead of them. Parents don't really count because that's a given. So this goes beyond a church staff. If a young adult is only connected to the lead pastor or to a pastor of the church, but not connected to other adults in the church, they're most likely not going to stay. They don't feel that they belong. Pastors or directors, they get paid to connect. So that doesn't really count. It's a culture of adults feeling that they want to be and they like being around younger people. Do they invite them into their coffee time or their talking time? Do they have relationship with them? Do they sit with them when we have a church-wide potluck? All those kind of things. That kind of gravitates towards that. It's both informal and formal. So what churches do is like, hey, we just need to have a potluck. We just need to get them involved and get them in the room together. Here's what they found. Proximity does not equal community. Just because they're in the same room together does not mean they're in community with each other in that. So this could mean different life groups, but life groups is not the sole answer for all problems. What they've discovered in Growing Young is you need 5 adults, 5 Christian believers pouring into every one student or every one millennial. That is the number, that's the second factor besides keys for the kingdom, serving. That keeps a person resilient faith throughout their 20s, and they don't, once they graduate high school, graduate from their faith. That means small group leaders. That means their parents. That means people more than just that they see every day in their life are people asking how they are spiritually as an adult. That's hard. We need to do the work of relational health and wholeness. We need to tackle the epidemic of loneliness. Gen Z and millennials are lonely, even if they don't say that. That's why because they'll never feel that they belong enough. They're always seeking more enough because they have to experience something, because truth is relative. It all builds onto each other. So if they feel that digital strain, as in I'm trying to find friends, I'm trying to connect, no one will text me back, no one will snap me back on Snapchat, they can see the church that you belong here, and you don't have to be constantly reminded that you belong here. What are some ways that we do this? Now, community needs to be facilitated. Rarely does it happen naturally for these younger generations. And here's a big key. The older generation has learned to communicate face to face. They've learned to do the small talk. They've learned to talk about the weather, all this. The younger generations hasn't really learned that skill set as well as the older generations. So that's why they're waiting in line for a movie, or they're waiting in line at the grocery store. They hop on their phone because they don't know how to wait in silence. They don't know how to talk to people if they're not asking questions back and forth. So community needs to be facilitated in the church rather than just thinking, oh, they will naturally integrate in other churches. They don't have the skill set in that. That's why colleges has a huge community, and a lot of Christians who are resilient afterwards go to a Christian college or they're involved in a Christian ministry at a college, because there's this community there. There's this fellowship. There's give and take. There's feeding. There's accountability without structure in that. And there's that community there. So when they leave college and now they go to the church, they're responsible for finding their own community. Well, that's too hard. I'm not going to do that if I'm millennial or Gen Z. And so facilitating being in a community or how to get in community is huge. And this is the last one, probably the most controversial one I've seen, is don't wait for high schoolers to graduate to be part of the adult church. So many, when I first started this out, I'm reading all this stuff and I'm seeing and this is my kind of personal experience, I'm seeing that high school students don't feel part of the church until they graduate high school. Then they're treated like part of the church. Then they can maybe vote or serve, or then they can go to adult Sunday school classes and all that. And here's what's happening. In our church particularly, that was not happening. In fact, we have 3 worship services on a Sunday morning, and our 3rd worship service is also our Sunday school hour for our junior high and high school. They meet in 2 different rooms. And so what I was noticing, and I did a very intense survey, 35% of our high school students never attended a worship service because their parents would go to the 3rd service, they would go to Sunday school, they would meet up afterwards, and then go home. So they never treated our churches as their church. It was their parents' church. And man, we had even more leave the church and not come back. They say it's a college, or they say they moved away, and a lot of that is reality, but they never looked for other churches as well. And it just broke my heart. And I realized that our high school students, Sunday school was the biggest hurdle for them to feeling ownership of the church. So we actually canceled high school Sunday school, and now we encourage our high school students to do 2 things. 1, go to the worship service, go with your family, sit with your friends, experience the worship service. And 2, or some people, they choose one or other, serve on a Sunday morning, serve on our kids' wheel, in our kids' world, serve coffee, be part of the ushers. No high school student wants to be part of the usher, but they can serve and do that, be part of the worship band. And that's been a hard culture for our church to live on. But what I'm noticing in the bigger churches and a lot of church plants, they don't have high school Sunday school. So most of them don't have Sunday school at all. And I'm not against Sunday school, but sometimes when we isolate high school students in a separate room from the rest of adults, they don't ever learn that skill set to intermix with other adults. Now, middle school kids, I actually fully support kids worship and Sunday school to separate. Kids don't always get or can comprehend what worship is, and that skill set, and again, this might get me in trouble, so this is just one opinion. This skill set and this belief that we need to have our kids sit in the worship service so they can experience worship, and they can experience listening and being quiet and the culture of the church. Here's what happens. Most likely parents give them a digital tool, a tablet, a phone, so they can be quiet, so they don't actually experience in the worship service. They don't actually experience that because they're distracted, because it's distracting talking, or I'm hungry, or all this. I get that. I'm a parent of little ones. So the parents are not necessarily doing the job of a family ministry in that self. Now, there's nothing wrong with family ministry, but as a result, we're moving into this realm of, okay, just being in the worship service, proximity does not equal community. We need to get to where the kids are excited about worship, and the kids are excited about being with Jesus. So that's why my research shows that high school students are different than junior high students. Junior high students still doesn't fully grasp everything that goes on in the worship service. And if you have a church that has worship service, then Sunday school, and they don't meet at the same hour, this is probably not a big problem for you. But what we've noticed is isolating high school students, they're already looking for adult privileges, but they don't have that adult responsibility. This is something we can guide them. And so we meet with high school students, and I have conversations, and I have small group leaders, encourage them, what are you doing on Sunday morning? It hasn't gone well. We're 3 years into it, and so we're just now seeing growth and teenagers serving and all that. But it took about 2 years for our church culture and our parents to understand that. So we're going to kind of wrap up with 2 more slides, and we'll be done. So Pro Church Tools is a YouTube page that I highly recommend. He is a millennial talking about, and he does announcements for his church, and he talks about what are some things the millennials or Gen Z is attracted to when it comes to churches. And he did a YouTube page on this, and he basically said 3 things. 1, they want to be real over relevant. They've been promoted to, sold stuff to, conditioned to be sold to all the time. So if a church comes across as salesy, they're not going to want that. They're going to not gravitate towards that. 66% of millennials believe the church is hypocritical. So they're going to see right through your sales pitch. They're automatically coming in as a skeptic. You need to win them over, not through your sales pitch, but being real. 2, they desire true community. This is a repetitive theme. I get it. But community and true community can only be offered through the church. I think the church can offer community more than any organization in the world that's different, that's authentic, that's special. And for some reason, we kind of almost apologize for it, or we hide how easy it is to be involved in that. And we don't put a lot of effort or resources in how to get people assimilation into community. When describing church, 78% choose community over privacy. They're okay sharing their personal information if they feel part of a community. 78%. So signing up to that kind of stuff, it's actually, some people believe, oh, they don't want to sign up or fill out all this information. They do if they know it's going to lead to true community. 65% choose casual or over dignified, and they look for a healthy and safe place for their kids. Here's the other thing. If their kids, if a millennial parent particularly, feel that their kids are safe and healthy and part of a community, they will go to that church even if they don't feel it themselves. If you have a dynamic, awesome kids ministry, you're going to get parents who are more willing to show up. Now, the problem is those parents will probably show up minimally, not maybe be part of the community or not serve, but the kids will drag the parents sometimes, and that's a trend that's reversed from the years past. Josh, he's actually a millennial that I talked to him. I did a survey once starting this 3 years ago, and I took my team and myself took as many millennials out to lunch, and we said, hey, what's your involvement in our church, and why are you involved, or why not you're involved? And community was a huge aspect. And he says this is basically a quote from him. I can get any worship song from Spotify, any sermon from YouTube or a podcast. I want to be a place where my wife and I can belong. That's what he wants. If you're thinking that's repetitive, it is repetitive, because that's how important it is. And number 3, seat at the table. They want to be taken seriously. They don't want to be treated as a millennial. They don't want to be treated as a young adult. They want to be treated as an adult. They want to be included in the decision-making process and in the leadership. Inviting them to serve on a leadership board or the elder board is not getting them a seat at the table. It is literally, but they want to experience that. They want to know, what does that mean? Oh, so I'm just going to show up to meetings, or am I actually going to have a voice in that? And here's the thing. They want to give that voice before they're even given that position, which is awkward, which is difficult, which is way more work. But that's what they're looking for. Here's the trend that one of the reasons why I'm so passionate on this topic. Right now in the American church, there are more pastors over 65 years old than there are under 40 years old. 5-10 years from now, these pastors are going to be retiring, and we might not have enough. In fact, I think we don't have enough pastors to replace them. What is that saying? That's a huge thing that we could tackle as a church directly. So, wrapping up with this. Sorry, going a little bit longer, but wrapping up for this. Here's some quick tips that didn't really fit into any category from my research. Make Sundays worth their time. New to you doesn't mean new to them, okay? So the environment and atmosphere is just as important. How the parking lot works is just as important. So if you have a new worship band, or hey, this is a new song, or hey, we got coffee this Sunday, or hey, the pastor starts wearing casual dress and jeans, they don't care. They do that before. There's 99 other places that can serve coffee. They can get any worship band, a Spotify, or a bar. And hey, we're now on Facebook, so does grandma. So that's not necessarily new to you. And again, I'm not trying to insult any particular person, but we need to wow them with the surprises and hospitality. Maybe do some decoration. Maybe they experience a new sermon series. Could you decorate the hallway completely different, like you would, not childish, but like VBS, and it's something, oh, wow, you surprise them with something. Address felt needs. They're looking for marriage advice. They're looking for parenting advice. If you're not doing one of these or both of these series every single year, you're missing out, because that's the 2 most prominent topics they want to talk about in that. Provide easy connecting opportunities. If they're married, if they're single, if they're kids, if they have no kids, those are 4 totally different worlds. that they are living in? Do you have connecting life groups, small groups, opportunity Sunday school classes that they can belong for that? If they have to find their own childcare in order to be part of a small group, that's why. Why would I do that? Other churches offer childcare and all that. So you need to be able to work with that. And that requires more work. I get it. It's not necessarily right, but it's reality. Utilize the power of convenience, and that's kind of connection. They have more time and more choices available to them. So if it's really hard to sign up, as in you have to go to the information table on a Sunday morning to sign up for this event and not have them do it online right then and there, get out their phones that already probably have it out in the service, that's going to be a hurdle. Make it as convenient as possible to get connected or to sign up to your event. And digital sign up is easier, convenient. Remember, they are mostly unchurched. So Andy Stanley's Irresistible is a great book I recommend. Sharing biblical references is foreign to them. So, hey, remember when Moses built the ark? No, Moses didn't technically build the ark. Noah did. But sometimes we rattle off these quick little examples as part of our point. Well, they have no reference of those biblical examples. They didn't grow up in kids' Sunday school to hear about Noah building the ark. And last thing, showcase how your church is making a difference beyond the building. Say we had 10 people accept Christ this year in 2019. We had 5 people get baptized. We made 200 boxes for Operation Christmas Child. Actually share that on your social media, share that on Sunday morning, celebrate that, repeat that over and over again. Every time you mention your offering, mention what your offering goes to in that. Now, your offering does go to paying the bills and paying your staff. That's not necessarily what motivates people, but maybe your offering today. We do an after school program every year for our kids ministry, and we have 10 kids who show up every time. Your offering goes to a thing like that. You're making an impact. So that's pretty much all the questions, or I mean, all the things that I have. I know I zipped through it. I know I came across a little opinionated. That's just because the time is short. I'd love to get your questions. We'll just have a few moments to kind of get the questions and all that. So I'm going to stop doing the screen share, and we can answer some questions. So I apologize if I zip through that. What's your comments, thoughts?
Hey, Kyle, I got a question.
Yeah.
This is Andrew over at Zor.
Okay. Hey.
So our Sunday school time at our church is obviously segregated. There's like 7 different classes, and then I teach a junior high and high school class.
Yep.
One of my ideas is coming in because I wanted that interaction was to just rebrand the class for everyone and have like adults interacting with the students in that Sunday school hour, and then presenting material that would be interesting to both, where like the adults and the students could discover things together. So maybe like an inductive Bible study where we cover sort of basic things, but the adults would get deeper things because, you know, they know more, and the students could just get more basic things. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that? Because that's something I want to move forward with. If it's a good idea, is just making a new class, or maybe we combine people who don't like the Sunday school class that they're in already and want to interact with kids. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I could have, super easy answer, but I would kind of specify this. You know, every church is different. Every culture is different. What we noticed was we have adult Sunday school classes that are happening at the same time as our senior high classes. And so our original idea that we talked about is, hey, let's create a class where adults and youth come together, and then we do some kind of interactive lesson. Maybe parents can share. So we talked and tested the market and talked to some of our adults. Oh, they hated that idea. Yeah. They hated that idea. Oh, it's childish. I don't want to be around kids. And so if my one caveat would be, if the adults then you need to talk to maybe privately. I don't think this should be a public discussion, but privately to some of the adults who aren't willing to kind of make room for those high school students. That's going to be a hard sell. And if students feel adults don't want them there, doesn't matter your message, doesn't matter anything else, that will kill it. So maybe have that conversation. I don't know. There has been churches who have multi-generational classes, Sunday school classes, but it's a lot less discussion oriented. I think the worship service is multi-generational, but we don't ask a lot of things for people to do or discuss in that. And in Sunday school, you kind of need to discuss that. I think you'll need to have a little bit more conversation with maybe core influential students and adults in that in order to see it works. But what's interesting is Sunday school is going away. Life groups are attacking or growing up, but a lot of churches are changing Sunday school, making it more life group oriented, or getting rid of Sunday school altogether. Some of it is practical. They don't have the space anymore. And some of it is it's getting older. The history of Sunday school is they need, especially in the older days in the 1800s, they used Sunday school to teach people how to read before church. And that's why they called it Sunday school. That's the history of Sunday school. Again, I'm not anti-Sunday school, but that's the trend. Other questions? Going once, twice, sold. Russ, was there anything in the chat that we need to discuss?
I don't think so. There were a couple good comments or links as far as quotes or something to go check out, video to go watch, that kind of thing. So that were related to what you were talking about. So yeah, well, thanks everybody. I appreciate you joining.
Yes,
thanks
you.
Kyle for your leadership and all this. We will have the videos available shortly, and then
And PowerPoints.
And links to some of the resources that have been shared and things like that. So again, just thanks so much. Appreciate your time, appreciate your attention and interest. So may God bless you as you serve and move on with the rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Yeah.